Hey, Anna. Thanks for
Hello.
doing your presentation. Go ahead when you're ready.
All right. So I did my ecotourism final on a state park called Indian Springs State Park. So what is Indian Springs? To start off with, it is a Georgia state park located near I-75 in Flovilla, Georgia, which is about 45 minutes south of where I live in Covington. And it's one of the oldest state parks in all of the United States. And it's actually the oldest park in Georgia. It was once home to Creek Indian tribes, and the springs became known and famous for the quote unquote healing powers of their mineral waters there, which that's a little picture. That's the best picture I could find to the right there. But they've built this little thing up around where the water flows out, and you can come and put like your cup or your jugs and whatnot up to the little pipe there and fill it up with the natural water. And it grew in size with the creation of railroads and public access. It brought visitors from everywhere in the country. This was back a long time ago, which brings us into the tourism life cycle. So after examining the state park, which I've been there a lot camping, I haven't been recently, obviously, because we're stuck at home, but we go there a lot to camp. And I determined that it was in the rejuvenation stage of the tourism life cycle and it was headed upwards, which means that over the years, technology and infrastructure in the park has increased, which means the destination has had more carrying capacity and ability to see more travelers. Because like I said, we camp there now. So over the last couple of years, they've really invested more into their campground and cottages, which offer guests an overnight experience instead of just coming for the day to visit. But the springs and surrounding park also offer a deeper look into Georgia's history and Native American culture, but it's definitely past its peak stage days. Now back then it was high in demand and it was popular and a lot of people wanted to come to see the springs and to try the water and all that jazz, but now it's mostly just local people, which brings us to the attracted tourists. So local people are the majority of the tourists that visit this park at this point in its life cycle. The local people see Indian Springs in two different lights: business and personal.
Mhm.
It's business because the springs act as a source of income for the county. Flovilla is a very tiny city, and this state park is really the main thing that brings people to come to their little town. So it acts as a source of income because the money brought in from tourists and other visitors. And then not only does it help stimulate the local economy, but tourists and locals can also collect the gallons of free flowing water for their personal use, which, like I said, every time we've been, we see somebody with their car trunk just filled up with like jugs and gallons and things, and they'll just bring it and they'll fill up on water and they have water for the whole month.
Hmm.
So some of the impacts, although there were some environmental disruptions due to the construction of the park throughout the years and eventually the campground and the cottages, all of the springs and just about most of the natural environment remain intact because each of the stakeholders are invested in preserving the park and its resources due to how much they depend upon the tourism income. And especially there's still a high like Native American belief system held by the local population since that's what it was built around back in the day. um, and they all highly believe in protecting the very thing that's drawing the people there, which is the springs and the water. So some of the stakeholders, the campground host, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and the local people, they all ensure that there are rules in place throughout the park to help keep it intact and the amount of human impact down. Some of the sustainability efforts that they've done to enhance sustainability, the owners of the park being the state of Georgia and the Department of Natural Resources, they'll periodically close their rental cottages to make like erosion and landscaping repairs and things like that. They have a dam there with a lake and stuff, and I've seen it before where the lake has been drained and there's been no water in it, so I'm sure that that has something to do with sustainability and trying to get repopulate maybe the lake and things like that. But I wasn't able to ask about that because I haven't been back since I've seen that. So but And then in respect to the local and tourist perspective, the state park works closely with a neighboring state park that's about 15-20 minutes away, and a wildlife refuge called Dosset Trails that's really only about 5 to 10 minutes drive, and they to increase the preservation efforts while still encouraging tourism. And they've done this because like they've made a path from the campground in Indian Springs and the cottages to Dosset Trail so that you can walk instead of have to drive and stuff like that. And they do a lot of just like activities, like the state parks will pair up and they'll have like an event with Dosset Trails for a weekend or something like that. And it just kind of involves all the neighboring places. And this helps to save, on some gas emissions, and it also increases or encourages the people staying there to walk and go places by walking instead of driving. And then lastly is my carbon footprint. So when I took the quiz, my CO2 amount came in at 13 tons, which at first I was like, whoa. But then I looked up like what the average was and how they measure it and all that. And the lowest possible thing to receive was a 8.5. So 13 wasn't too bad, but I realized there are ways I could reduce my carbon footprint and and be more eco-friendly, which would include taking shorter showers, because I take very long showers, walking more places instead of driving, or taking some sort of public transportation method, and just using all around better better items for the environment, like, metal straws and no plastic, things like that. So. And then there are my sources, and then a few more pictures of just some of the things that the park has. You can actually host weddings and things there. They added that on recently too, to try and gain a little more income and tourists and things like that. So. All right.
Okay. So how did you decide? I mean, it is close to you.
Yes.
Was there anything that surprised you about Indian Springs that they're doing that you didn't quite realize before this project?
Well, I didn't know that it was the oldest, because we've been going there forever, because it's the closest state park to us. So whenever my parents would feel like camping, that'd just be where we would go on the weekends. And so I didn't know, when I was researching it, I didn't know that it was the oldest in Georgia. And one of the first, it was that one, and another one was the first to be built ever in the U.S. So, I mean, that was pretty cool. And then I've always wondered about the style homes around there, because it's very like antebellum style houses, and like some of the old hotels that were built were even in that style, because it was such a long time ago that it was popular and things like that. So I learned that, because I always wondered why these houses here in this little bitty place where there's not really anything, because it's a tiny town. There's really there's nothing there except for this park.
Yeah.
But
I've actually driven past it, so yeah.
I bet you, yeah. I don't come that way. I cut off before you pass it, but it's right there every time I come home from school. It'd be right there at it. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, good job.